Good afternoon. Welcome to EduSet Network. Friend, today we have another lecture on communication theory. The precise topic is normative theory of communication. There are various normative theory like authoritarian, libertarian, social responsibility, and many others. Started from with four theory, and later on some theorists said that no, not only four, there should be 6 to 7 theory. So the debate is also on number and also about its connotation and what are the basic concepts. So we'll try to explore all this topology and all these concepts in a today lecture. The time is just 1 hour, so we'll not be able to have extensive lecture on it, but we'll try to understand the basic principle, basic concept of it. And for discussion on this topic, we have in the studio the same resource person, Professor Saswati Goswami. She teaches in Indian Institute of Mass Communication, a premier institution on media in the country. And her experience of teaching and also as a working professional in different media organization will help us to understand this theory, normative theory, in a new perspective. And she also have keen interest in the health communication, political communication. I always write about this in different topic of health and politics and communication. So I hope our knowledge and experience will help us to understand the normative theory of media and will also give her new insights. So on her behalf, I welcome her for EduSet lecture. Welcome, Emma.
Thank you so much, sir. This has been a long journey. Again, I repeat myself. We have talked about communication. We had talked about political economic theory of communication. We had talked about media and modernity theory. And of course, we had talked about sociological theory. Now we come to normative theory. Normative itself is a word which suggests there is a norm, there is a pattern. It means, normative means relating to an ideal standard or model. And it has a norm, it is a given situation in a given situation, and the ideals to be taught and to emulate is what normative theory will talk about. Let me make one thing clear. The theories that we had talked till now were more related to society in a different way. The political economy was trying to see the relationship of the media organization with the content along with the society. Similarly, sociological theory was ingrained in the theory of sociology and trying to understand the society and the relationship of media. And of course, but this normative theory has a different texture. This theory is more related to how media should behave or what is the pattern of the behavior of media in a given political and social situation. So the type of theory that describes an ideal way for media system to be structured and operated within a specific social value system is called normative theory. So what is important here is the ideal way for a media system to be structured or to operate, to be there in that system and to effectively work in that system and within that specific social value system. This has a historical context. In fact, what happened after World War II was that the world was divided into two dimensions. One, it had developed countries as a group. Then two, it had the communist model, the Soviet model, the Russian model, and there was a Cold War in between. And those countries which were not belonging to any of these two two dimension, like the developed countries, the capitalist mode and the socialist mode, where those who were the most attractive of all, like everyone wanted to attract them and get them to their own position. And it will be pertinent to tell you right here now why what is first world, what is second world and the third world. It actually emanates from the same idea. First world is the capitalist developed countries, second world is the socialist communist countries, and the third world is the developing countries. So on this particular perspective, this theory had developed, and the seminal book on this theory was the 4 Theories of Praise, written by 3 very eminent scholars, Frederick S. Siebert, Theodor Peterson and Wilbur Schramm. In fact, Wilbur Schramm is extensively read by all communications academy or academics or students of all communication theories, and you all know him mostly, maybe already you have heard about him. But Siebert, Peterson and Wilbur Schramm's this particular book called 4 Theories of Praise, written by them, had sought to theorize the role mass media assumed in the world, and it was specifically focusing on Western Europe, the United States and Soviet Union in the wake of World War II and the Cold War. This is something which you have to keep it in mind when you read this particular theory. What did the theory say? These 3 authors, they contended that praise assumed the task of social responsibility. In democratic societies, they had a social responsibility, and they suggested that the measure of the media's freedom corresponded with the political system in which it was embedded. Let me explain it. How much the media will enjoy freedom will depend on the political system on which it was growing, it was embedded. So they say that there is a social responsibility task, but it was according to the political system that the country was following. So the entire concept of freedom had a different meaning in different social system. They go on to say that the praise takes on the form and coloration of the social and political structure within which it operates. So in fact, this is an explanation of the first contention. It is that the political and social structures like the governance, the government, the economic situation and all these things ultimately shape and give color to the media of that particular country. The press and other media in their view will reflect the basic beliefs and assumptions that the society holds. So the media will have a role particularly in that particular social context to reflect the ideas and value system that is ingrained in that particular social system. In the Western, and what are these values? What are these values? If you take the example of Western liberal tradition, these values are freedom, equality before law, social solidarity and cohesion, cultural diversity, active participation and social responsibility. Why are they calling Western liberal tradition full of these values? Because that is supposed to be the democratic system. So there is freedom for people and everyone is equal for law. The social solidarity and cohesion is at the maximum. Cultural diversity adds to the freedom and it makes it more democratic. There is active participation of the people, and the social responsibility is something which becomes a part of the entire society. So all these things will come together and frame the ideology of the media. It will show how the media it will have a reflection on how the media will behave in the Western liberal tradition. That was an example. Different cultures may have different principles and priorities, which is very obvious. So accordingly, the media will also try to emulate those ideas, those principles and those priorities. The four theories proposed four typologies of press system, and which are authoritarian, libertarian, socially responsible, and Soviet communist. Authoritarian, libertarian, socially responsible, and Soviet communist. If you look at these four typology, you will see that they are actually trying to frame the social system into four existing social system into four broad groups. Let us start with the authoritarian theory. What this theories say is that it applies to the early pre-democratic society and to today's undemocratic or autocratic system. Now, what is a pre-democratic society? We in fact almost talked about it when we were talking about modernization. A pre-democratic society is mostly where democracy had not started. Either it is monarchical, or it is feudal, or it might be an autocratic system. So, in an autocratic system or on a monarchy structure, the authoritarian rule will obviously prevail. The authoritarian theory developed between the 16th and 17th century England, and even now it may be practiced in few countries where there is prevalence of such system of government. Now, I do not want to name any country being authoritarian, but there are still, supposedly there are many countries which are still authoritarian when it comes to the rule of the day. The media in authoritarian system are not allowed to print or broadcast anything which could undermine the established authority, and any offense to the existing political values is avoided. How does the media behave? Media is not free. It is under the authoritarian system. They are not allowed to print or broadcast anything which will go against the political system of the time, and anything that will actually critique the political values of that government. The authoritarian government may go to the step of punishing anyone who questions the state's ideology, which is almost obvious, because authoritarian itself means where there is one person who, or one system who actually rules it. The fundamental assumption of the authoritarian system is that the government is infallible. That is, that the government is one which is beyond criticism. It is one who has the authority over everything, and they know the best. Media professionals are therefore obviously not allowed to have any independence within the media organization. So, the media professionals are under the government, and they cannot have the freedom that is ideal for a media house or a media organization to function. Also, foreign media are subordinate to the established authority. By that it means that even if a foreign media is prevalent, then it will be under the authority, and all that is being imported from the foreign media will be controlled by the state. It will be scrutinized, it will have a censorship, and then only it will be put into the media. Let us go to the libertarian theory. This theory came from the libertarian thoughts of the 16th century Europe. These theories are against authoritarian value system. What they believe is that authoritarian value is not conducive to human development. So, this libertarian system is the best. And the main premise of libertarian view is that the individual should be free to publish wherever he or she wants. That is, there should be extreme liberty, absolute liberty to speak out one's own mind. The history of this thought process is generally traced to the writings of thinkers like John Milton, Locke, Mill, and the general philosophy of rationalism and natural rights. So, as you see, as you know, if you have heard of John Milton, he was one who had talked about freedom of speech extensively. In fact, I had quoted him in the class of political economy, where he had said that those people who rob you of your eyesight are the people who blame you that you are blind. That is not exactly his words, but this is the essence of his words. In the libertarian system, governments are open to criticism, and it is often encouraged to be so. So, there is a space for the people to critique the government. The government allows it, and not only allows it, it encourages criticism. They believe in the libertarian system, they believe that out of criticism only they can evolve and develop and conform to the expectation of the people. There is no restrictions of information or news coming in from the international domain. There is nothing called restriction or censorship. Everything is allowed to free flow. Journalists and media professionals have full autonomy within the media organization. A journalist is full of freedom. He can expose anything he wants to, and he can talk about anything he wants to, and critique the government and put forward his views, and that sounds really a great system to be in, isn't it? This theory was, of course, born in America in the 1940s. The Commission on Freedom of Press provided a model in which the media had certain obligations to society. Let me give you a little brief. In fact, the free-flowing privatization was something which had created certain trouble in America. They were understanding that the amount of responsible journalism that they wanted was not being achieved. So, there was the Commission on Freedom of Press was set up, and on the basis of this model, the social responsibility model theory had come up. These obligations were expressed in the words informativeness, truth, accuracy, objectivity, and balance. You might be a little bit confused between the libertarian and social responsibility theory. It sounds almost similar, but then in social responsibility theory, we will come down when you see that there is a little bit of a difference. Let me explain it first, and then we will go to the differences. This theory is based on informativeness. There should be information, there should be truth, there should be accuracy, there should be objectivity and balance in the information flow. Siebert, one and his co-authors, writes that the goal of the social responsibility system is that media as a whole is pluralized, indicating a reflection of the diversity of society as well as access to various points of view. So, what they say is that the whole media system should be pluralized, and it should reflect the diversity of the society as well as access to various points of view, which means the society needs to be reflected as it is, and various points of view should come up in the media. The democratic space should be totally, really, in a real sense, democratic. That is, the media space needs to be democratic, and accordingly they should behave. In fact, as I said, this theory is somewhere located between authoritarian and libertarian theories. Though it sounds sounds like a libertarian theory, but we have to remember that there is something called social responsibility, which itself some critics say is a binding on the liberties of the media. It believes on total media freedom on one hand, because what does it say? It says that it should reflect the entire diverse fabric of the society. It should include everyone's voice. but then it should be socially responsible. So, total media freedom on one hand, but again selective external controls on the other. So, there should be a selective external control. This should be done by the concept of social responsibility. See, I will just give you an example. There is a news on an activity which you perceive as unsocial or against society, and another group of the society believes that it is very social, it's for the society. Now, how do you actually, in a socially responsible system, you put out that news in the media? What you do is, from your framework, there will be a framework of social responsibility. So, it is not free for all sort of a system, it is a system where there will be a framework on the basis of which this social responsibility will be elicited, and you decide which perspective of the news should go, or whether that news should go at all or not. In fact, our government controlled media like All India Radio and Doordarshan, they have a code of conduct which is written down, which has things like not talking bad things about any community, not talking badly about your friendly neighbors and things like that. So, the framework for social responsibility is made there. It is not that it is an idea which is completely irreversible. It is something which can be, it should be flexible, but then there is something to go back to. You can look at it and see whether your news is actually conducive to that idea or not. This theory, social responsibility theory, helped in creating professionalism in media by setting up high level of accuracy, truth and information. As a student of journalism and mass communication, and only if you are only a student of journalism, then also you will see that you have been taught throughout that your news should be accurate, it should be truthful, and the information should be correct. In fact, this emanates from the social responsibility theory. So, you become a more responsible journalist. You just don't write something because you believe that is right. You write something because you feel responsible to the system. You write something because that will in fact help the society to evolve, and it will be a more inclusive society. This is in essence is the social responsibility theory. In contrast to these three theories, the group of authors Sebert, Peterson and Schramm had also evolved another theory which is called Soviet media theory. It is also known as communist media theory. Obviously, because the Soviet political system was ingrained in the communist theory of Marx and Engels. Sebert traces the roots of this theory back to the 1917 Russian Revolution, and which was based on the ideology of Marx and Engels. The media organizations in this system were not intended to be privately owned and were to serve the interest of the working class. So, what happened was that there was a control over the media. There were no private media houses. Everything was under the control of government, and all media were supposed to only serve the interest of the working class or the general people. An illustration of the Soviet system might seem to be similar. You might feel that it is almost like authoritarian model. The government controls the media. They don't allow the news to be produced just like that. It looks like, apparently it looks like that. But because both the system, authoritarian and the Soviet media theory, believes on a centralized government, a government which will control and which will be superior to the media institutions. But then let me tell you, there are few differences between both the theories. Apparently, though they seem similar, like the social responsibility and libertarian theories look similar. Similarly, the authoritarian theory and Soviet media theory also looks a little bit similar, but the differences are that the mass media in Soviet model are expected to be self-regulatory when it comes to the content. They have the social responsibility framework somewhere written. Of course, their social responsibility depends on the philosophy and the ideology of their social or political system, but then there is a responsibility ingrained into the content. So, they will be self-regulatory, they will not be behaving as a totally free journalist. Also, the Soviet theory differs from the authoritarian theory in that in this theory the media is perceived to be responsible to the people. So, it is self-regulatory as well as responsible to the people. So, whatever they broadcast or whatever they print or whatever they disseminate as information in whatever media, they will have social responsibility ingrained in it. They will only work for the people. The underlying objective of this theory is to provide a complete and objective view of the world according to Marxist-Leninist principle. So, the basic idea was to propagate the ideology of Marx and Lenin through the media to the people. Now, isn't the social responsibility theory also trying to propagate the ideology of that state? Isn't authoritarian theory trying to propagate the idea of the state or even libertarian? Because the idea of the state is authoritarian, so the media is behaving in an authoritarian way. Idea of the state is libertarian, so the media will be propagating the ideas of libertarian theory. Similarly, you can equate it with social responsibility as well as the Soviet media theory. So, but as I said, I would like to remind you again, you have to remember these four theories, these four typologies were framed in the wake of World War II and Cold War, when there was a huge division in the entire world on the basis of First World and the Second World. When there were political decisions, there were international decisions taken on the perspective of the ideology followed by the particular country, whether it was a Soviet Marxist leaning country or whether it was a capitalist leaning country. On the basis of this, the world was divided, and there was a group of countries who were non-aligned. Though it is not pertinent right now to talk about non-aligned, but this is what actually happened. They were not aligned to any of the groups, they wanted to have their own ideas, but the perspective of this theory was to attack this non-aligned group to their own ideas of a political system. Every theory can be criticized. These four theories, out of these four theories, you can criticize every theory independently. Like authoritarian theory, you can say that nothing like that actually happens. There are issues which are in the gray area in authoritarian system, libertarian system, social responsibility system. Even libertarian system will not allow a certain extreme in freedom, nor social responsibility will allow total social responsible behavior, because say even the social responsible framework will depend on a political system or an ideological system. Which ideology is followed will define the social responsibility framework. So, these criticisms can be ingrained, but then generally there is certain criticism which is always put forward for the four theory of praise. First is that these theories are very idealistic. These theories has a very deep idealism ingrained into it, that authoritarian should be like this, libertarian should be like this, socially responsible should be like this, and so the Soviet media will be like this. This idealism is actually which doesn't make it very relevant to the society. These theories fails to recognize changes in societies and political thinking over time, because we have to understand one thing: society is not something which is given, it is always a changing idea. Political system is also a changing idea. One country which is capitalist today might become a different country tomorrow because of the socio-political realities of that country. We had seen Soviet Union, USSR being fragmented and brought down into a different, that is what happened during the lifetime of people like us. So, more changes had come in. Monarchy had died down in Europe, certain European countries. The monarchy is only for namesake. The British Parliament had amended certain provisions through which now the Prime Minister cannot be called down by the monarch. So, systems are changing. Even when the monarchy was very much quite strong, not very much, quite strong in Britain, even then the social responsibility theory or libertarian theory could have been applied there. So, these changes in the society and political thinking over time is not taken into consideration in these 4 theories. It also fails to consider other prevailing political systems like the Scandinavian model, because Scandinavian model was a little bit different. That independence is still maintained, but this particular model has not been discussed by this 4 theory of press. Also it fails to recognize media systems in third world, because about the third world it is totally simply silent. The third, of course, though this is a criticism, but we have to accept one thing, these theories, 4 theory of praise had evolved, again I am repeating, evolved in the wake of World War II and Cold War. So, immediately after World War II and the Cold War and all those colonies getting liberated, independent, this third world was not much into reckoning. But if you have read Schramm, you know that later on he had devoted a huge amount of his academic work onto analyzing the third world development model and the communication pattern for it. So, as for this 4 theory, you can always provide it as a criticism that this does not concern with the third world. The places like Asia and South Asia and Africa, and of course, the Indian subcontinent, a part of it which has a huge presence in the third world countries. Beyond these 4 theories, now the necessity was to go beyond these 4 theories. And those theories, as I said, were relevant to a particular historical framework, time frame. But beyond that, a lot of development had happened after that, and that necessitated a different sort of outlook and different sort of perspective about the theory, normative theory. Dennis, I had told you in the first class, I think that Dennis McQuell's book, Mass Communication Theory, an introduction, which has run into 7th, 8th edition, is a seminal book which you can always read. And Dennis McQuell was one of those theorists who had tried to look at normative theory beyond those 4 theories. So, he writes in his book that Siebert and his co-authors wrote the book during the time of Cold War, when the uncommitted world was the object of adoration. Those people who were not committed, those countries who were not committed were the countries who were adored, and every group was trying to woo them to their own ideas and ideologies and political system. So, on this perspective, Siebert's book was okay, but that book has basically looked at the press, not the other media technology. They were not very much concerned with television and radio. Press is, of course, has a different ownership pattern, different growth trajectory, and different presence in different countries. As we said, and you all know, press needs a level of literacy which is not important for radio or television. So, the behavior of the press will be a little bit of a educated behavior. It will have influence on the educated population, the middle class population, but it will not have that much of influence on the illiterate and the downtrodden or the marginalized or poor. Now, but then television and radio had democratized that portion of the population who could listen to radio and understand a number of things. Even television, visually they were given almost all information with the audio input. So, these theories were not looking at how radio and television had changed the entire political dimension of the country. As I said, if you remember that television was privatized in USA long back, but it was under public service broadcasting in England, and that happened in 1927 itself. It was a public service broadcasting, but the model of privatization that US was propagating and was making successful had inspired Britain to start its own private channel, which was called independent television. So, once the privatized group had come in, the public service broadcasting had someone to actually compete with, and secondly, that was a libertarian system, that was a socially responsible system. All of a sudden, when there is a private party coming in and talking and deciding on the agenda of the media, then the entire political system gets a little bit shaken, and it actually redefines itself and come out in a different way. So, this entire obliteration of media, new media technology like radio and television is something which Meckwell says makes this 4 theory not very adequate for the modern world. Thus, Dennis Meckwell and independently Alskull and Hassan, they hadn't written together. These 3 people had proposed 2 additional theories to accommodate the loopholes in the 4 basic theories. Of course, they had called them differently, but generally now for our own reference we call them call both, one we call it development media theory, the other we call democratic participant press theory. Just remember the words development media theory and democratic participant press theory. Let me explain a little bit about development media theory. This theory envisages a positive role for the media, because development is ingrained into it. The main objective of the theory is to attain development. The media should accept and carry out positive development tasks in line with nationally established policy. This is very interesting. What is the media expected to do? The media has to carry, first they have to accept and then carry forward the positive value system, and of course, the policy of the establishment, the established policies of the government concerned. So, there is a relationship between the media and the government in the development media theory. Freedom of the press should be open to restriction according to economic priorities and development needs of society. Now, freedom of the press should be open to restriction. Isn't there a contrast in there? Freedom of the press and open to restriction. Doesn't freedom of the press already say that there is no restriction? But here a restriction is there. What is the restriction? It is to prioritize the economical necessity of the country and the development needs of the society, and accordingly the press should only project those objectives. Press should give priority in their content to the national culture and language. It should, and this is one of the primary objective of the media, to propagate national culture and language. Journalists and other media professionals have both responsibilities and freedom in the information gathering and dissemination task. So, freedom comes with the baggage, if you call it a baggage, of responsibility. But as a thinking human being, don't you think that responsibility actually should come with freedom? We always talk about it, that freedom, rights and all these things comes with responsibility. If you are not responsible, your freedom will not be responsible, will not be utilized responsibility. So, that has been picked up in development media theory, and it is said that the journalists and other media professionals have both responsibilities and freedom in their information gathering and dissemination tasks. Now, let me go to the democratic participant press theory. This theory, on the other hand, focuses on the needs, interests and aspiration of a receiver in the political society. I'll explain it for you. In this particular theory, the participant becomes more important. The person who consumes the media content becomes more interest. His needs or her needs, interests and aspirations are to be catered to. The focus of the media will have to be the needs, interests and aspirations of the receiver. The right to relevant information to use the means of communication for interaction in small scale settings. You do not have to have big scale settings. Small scale settings also are necessary, where the relevant information and the means of communication is always available to them. Media institutions are in control of their audiences. As I said, the consumer or the viewer or the audience becomes the primary focus of this particular theory. This theory favors multiplicity, smallness of scale, locality, de-institutionalization. The institution building of media which was going on has been negated by this theory, and they say that it should be de-institutionalized. People should have access to media at a small scale. Interchange of sender-receiver roles. That sender-receiver roles also needs to be interchanged. You should not be, journalists should not only decide what will go into on air. It will be the person who actually is the consumer or the receiver of the entire message who will play a role. In a sense, if you look at the entire citizen journalist concept that has come up very recently, fits into this. The citizen has become a journalist. He is the one who is giving information to the general people. He has or she has the hands-on experience of that issue. So, a journalist need not go there and do a research on that issue, ask hundreds of questions and then come to and write a story and put it on news. Rather, the citizen journalist will be there. He or she is a part of the system, part of the situation. He or she is a victim of the situation in many cases, who will put those information to the people, and it becomes more, it shows a more relevance to the news, and the news become more like people believe one thing which is believable. Okay, this is a person who is there, who has suffered. So, this is the first hand report. So, it is more credible. The entire concept of credibility is dependent on the movement of the news, not from the sender to the receiver, it is the other way around too. The receiver also sends. So, what happens is that interaction becomes wider, broader. It is more interactive. People actually participate in the entire information generation, and so the democratic participation in the press is ensured. Mackwell also discusses about public service broadcasting. He says that public service broadcasting is an important part of a democratic society. As I said, public service broadcasting had in fact started in Britain in 1927, when BBC was formulated in a public service broadcasting model. Before that, BBC was like any other model, just earning its own revenue and free of government control. But within the government system, with the help of license fee, taxpayers' money, BBC had developed itself into a public service broadcasting. The positive freedom that public broadcasting is supposed to deliver is the freedom from the market forces. So, what happens? We always say that BBC does not take any advertisers' money, so they are not bound to broadcast what the advertisers want. So, the credibility of the news is more when it comes from BBC. That is a saying. Of course, you will ask me a question, but when we see BBC, what's BBC in India, we see a number of advertisements coming in. So, that revenue model is, of course, had evolved down the time. But if you go to the go to UK, you will find it a different model being formulated and practiced. I am not going into that because it is out of context right now as we are talking about theories. Public broadcasting have obligation to listen to the people. They cannot just listen to the government, they have to listen to the people. People becomes the primary factor for them. As I said, public service broadcaster gets their revenue from the taxpayers' money. An amount of money is given every year to the public service broadcaster to generate their program and disseminate information. Obviously, that money belongs to the taxpayer. So, the obligation is to listen to the public. The influence of the state is greater in public broadcasting. That is a little bit contested because in India the public service broadcasting model is different from what BBC is practicing. Here maybe the influence of the state is greater, but in UK it's still in fact it is still quite liberated and they are not under the government. But then there has been murmurs of discontent, say even the British population saying that increasingly they are catering to government influence. In other words, the role and function of public broadcasting is for development of the people. It is for the people. Maxwell also discusses Habermas's theory of public sphere. He says that it can be used as a normative theory as it talks about the role of media in creating the public sphere and thus creating public opinion. In fact, that question had come up in the last class to tie up normative theory with Habermas's theory of public sphere. So, it is almost an answer to that question. It can be talked as a normative theory because in fact Habermas discusses the entire concept of media being a public space where people's opinion are viewed and people's opinion are put as an important issue in the media. So, there has been, as you have seen, there has been a great deal of evolution in the normative theory beyond these two additional theories. And in fact, you can always go on adding to it with the development of media every day. So, there are also two theories which are called alternative theory. One of them is the emancipation media theory and other is the communitarian media theory. I'm sorry I am cluttering you with too much of information, but it actually has a continuity. You cannot stop here and then not talk about these last two, which I thought, personally speaking, will be important for you to understand. The emancipatory media theory has its roots in the 1960s countercultural ideas. Countercultural ideas were mostly anarchistic and individualistic. They did not have a communistic idea of culture. It behaved like it was more anarchistic and individualistic. And now, if you see emancipatory theory, and in fact the theory believes that this individualized approach to or access to media, in fact, helped the media to emancipate from being only a public sphere. It is also about you talking to the people. And in fact, it is very relevant today because the new media that you all are so hooked to, the mobile telephony, the internet culture, the social networking sites, the emails which starts off in morning, the access to newspapers on internet, all these things makes media very individualized media. You are blogging, that is an individual space for you. You put up your own ideas, or no big media might be interested in your ideas, but you have a space where you can put up your own ideas, and people who follows your blog can always comment and counter comment on that. You evolve through it. Your entire social networking process is called alternative media in a sense, which makes you feel emancipated. There is an issue which is troubling you. You haven't been able to express your thoughts and your feelings about that issue. You take recourse to your blogs and your social networking sites to express that feelings and in fact generate discussion. Now, how much of that is really effective in changing the society is something which is beyond the framework of our discussion, but it does make you feel emancipated of the from the control of the big medias. It is based on the communication power of the people rather than the corporate houses. So, it is more emancipatory. However, it is applicable only to the countries which are rich in media. Internet access in the third world, we always know, is still very basic and minimal. So, of course, this emancipatory role that you can play is very urban centric and very it's more cost intensive, because of which that role cannot be explained. Let me now, towards the end, we do not have much time, I will come down to the communitarian theory. The goal of media in this theory is not intelligence, but civic transformation. It is not about informing or making you intelligent. It is about changing your civic life. News media, according to this theory, should seek to engender a like-minded philosophy among the people. There is a civic issue, everybody should be aware of that issue and they should try to change it, and everybody should be ingrained in that particular philosophy of changing the public. A revitalized citizenship shaped by community norms is the aim of the press. So, the citizenship is shaped in community norms. A community forms out of the citizens. So, this should be the aim of the press. It is often called very radical, reactionary and anti-libertarian, because that is how the communitarian theory perceives media to be. Beyond these theories, we can go on, so many new theories will come up. You can also talk about the concept of hegemony and the media ownership patterns and all those things, but I think to have the basic idea about from where normative theory had started and where it had at least reached by now, you need to know all this theory a little bit. But of course, you can extensively read up Mackwell, you can extensively read out Schramm on his ideas of development and the national development, ideas of national development and communication, and understand that in fact, there is nothing called airtight and grey area between these theories. These theories are they merge into each other and they had evolved into a different sort of theory, and normative theory, though it is easy to understand, is the basic of communication theory. This is how we understand communication and media and look at media in that way. I hope you got a brief about this theory, and thank you for today.
Okay, well, you talked about the various theory, and as you said that you are passing on so much information, but I would like to add some more because I have got confusion, or maybe it's related to it. Like apart from this, there are some theory like modernization theory and diffusion of innovation. So where to place them in a perspective for the benefit of a student?
No, see, this is a diffusion of innovation, modernization theory, development communication theory come into the development model.
Okay, so it's
social responsibility and development model, where Schramm had worked extensively. Okay. So that, as I said, this normative theory started after World War II. After that, the third world came into focus.
Okay.
And when the third world came into focus, the idea of media being only total on authoritative or libertarian and only social responsible was something they had questioned, and they came out with a new framework. And development communication theory, which includes diffusion of innovation, Everett M. Rogers' idea, and of course passing of the traditional society, all this came into developing it into a different framework. It's beyond normative theory now, it has developed as a new theory, the entire development communication theory, for which you can always have
now we can put into development media theory.
Yeah, it can always say development media theory. It started from there, like media's role in development.
But as far as the modernization theory is concerned, the modernization theory is just came about the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, what happened was that modernization theory was trying to tell us what is modernity, what is development. So development and modernity was simultaneously put together, and secondly, to achieve modernity you have to go through a particular framework of development, which was Rostow's 5 steps. Rostow had said that society goes to 5 steps, which I won't explain now, and then achieve modernity, and that is what development is all about. So that had that had a very strong impact on the development of the development communication theory. That is how development was visualized as a particular form, and that was again, of course, Paulo Freire and people like them had contested that idea.
Okay, and then comes to the Rogers diffusion of innovation theory.
Yeah, diffusion of innovation is also based on the modernization and development theory, because diffusion of innovation, what does it say? That if you have some innovation, diffuse it, people will pick it up and they will practice, and that will become the model.
He also talked about the five steps.
In fact, he had quoted Rostow extensively when he had talked about diffusion of innovation theory.
So influence of Rostow is much more on the
in
the mind of
exactly
Rogers.
Not only Rogers, the entire modernization theory has a strong influence on the development communication framework that we have. The alternative development communication framework is rarely used. The main development communication framework is based on Rostow's 5 steps.
Okay, so the third world, as you talked about the third world, so what are the major mainstream as we found in the normative theory? These were the 6 mainstream theory which using that we can explain the entire communication process as the communication framework. What do you find the major framework in which we can explain the third world situation?
See, third world situation can be, as I said in between, I had said social responsibility theory. In fact, what government has done within the controlled framework of Doordarshan and All India Radio is a social responsibility theory. They thought, in fact, our first Prime Minister had said that radio should be used for propaganda of development policies of the government.
Okay.
So that was a responsible behavior already made into a framework for radio, which was when SITE had started, or you had the first television channel in in Delhi. It was all about development. Responsibility was ingrained in it, that people should be informed and they should know what is happening in the name of development and they should participate. That way, the emancipation theory also comes in. So, you have to, in fact, if you look at an issue, then you have to think which theory comes in where. And as I said, there are no airtight compartmentalization. There are gray area, there are meeting point where, because as it has been mentioned, every nationality, every society had changed and evolved, and we are becoming, we had a mixed economy, we had a controlled economy, now we have an open economy. Even in open economy system, we have certain controls. So obviously we are still evolving. So certain things can be accepted, certain cannot be. From every theory you can pick up few things which will be applicable to Indian system, which will not be applicable to Indian system.
Okay, so as per the time and space, the theory also
changes and develops.
Okay, so what the next stage do you think?
I think it's a right time to actually develop an Indian system of theory of communication beyond Sadharanikaran. Because Sadharanikaran was the starting point. From there, we had accepted so many Western ideology of development.
Okay, what's Sadharanikaran?
It's an Indian form of communication. Where I couldn't touch it because that communication theory will need 2 more classes to actually, the Rasa and the Sadharanikaran theory. Professor Yadav had extensively written on that. So Indian system beyond that Sadharanikaran theory, where communication was supposed to be democratic and there will be, it would be very simplistic and democratic. From there, we have come into the intricate values of new media. So we have to evolve, and for that, a lot of theories needs to come in and talk now and decide.
Okay, fine. So, well, friends, with these words, we conclude the lecture. I thank all of you for watching the lecture, and I also thank Professor Saswati Goswami for giving such an insightful lecture and explaining all the major theory of communication. As in the beginning, she told you, we have started our journey with introductory part of the communication theory. Then we talked about the sociological theory, then we political economy, and we also discussed today the what is called normative media theory. So it's long journey, but in 1 week we try to cover the trajectory of communication theory. So I hope this will give you a brief introduction and insight how to study the communication theory, and certainly we will take up more communication theory in coming days, but not this month. So we'll schedule and inform you, so we'll come to know about that. So I again thank all of you and Professor Saraswati Goswami for giving such a wonderful lecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you.